Welcome to Mission Oriented, a veteran crowd podcast that showcases veteran talent from both the private and public sectors. Their impact is everywhere. We are here to uncover it. Here's your host, Bob Loudon.
Welcome, everybody, to the Mission Oriented podcast on the Veteran Crowd Network. This is your host, Bob Loudon. Well, I'm venturing off into a new area today, a very important topic. My guest is Lawrence Land. He's an attorney in Norfolk, Virginia. Lawrence, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
We, this is a new area for me. I am not a Marine, but have been hearing and listening with some interest over the last year or so about the water contamination issues at Camp Lejeune down in North Carolina. And, so we're going to talk about that today. And Lawrence is a little bit of a subject matter expert on this. We had a conversation about a week ago over lunch, and I learned a lot about it then, and I want to learn a lot about it, more about it today, and then share this because there seems to be a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of lack of information out there. So Lawrence, thank you. Well, we'll start with this, Lawrence. I mean, what happened? What happened at Camp Lejeune?
What happened at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1987 is a travesty. And what happened was that there were almost between 53 and 87, almost 1 million Marines and their families came through Camp Lejeune. The problem we have is that it is probably the #1 toxic camp in the entire United States, where it became a dumping ground during that 34-year period for just the worst imaginable contaminants. Give you an example. They dumped jet fuel, mustard gas, every kind of chemical. There was a dry cleaners where they just dumped all their chemicals into the ground. And what happened was it got into the aquifer, and they did this all the time. And so it seeped into the drinking water. The people at Camp Lejeune, the U.S. government knew about it and didn't do anything. So it was the best kept secret, unfortunately. And in my personal opinion, even though they have now taken responsibility as of August 10th of last year, the federal government has said, you know what, we made a mistake. And now we're going to pay the veterans and their families and people who stayed there for the terrible, terrible illnesses that were conceived as a result of being at Camp Lejeune. So most of them are all types of cancers, a lot of deformities. And I'll tell you, I get calls almost every day now. People don't think they have a case, and I explain to them that they do. They've called a couple of the lawyers, and these lawyers are telling them they don't have cases. I'm at the epicenter of these cases. I'm an authority on Camp Lejeune, and there are a lot of lawyers out there. You see them on TV, radio, whatever, who unfortunately have not done their homework. And I mean, I can't wait to take these cases that they're turning down. And there's some people who are advertising who aren't even lawyers.
Let me peel the layers of this a little bit before we kind of get into some of this. So Camp Lejeune dumping toxic waste. Was this happening in a landfill that was, improperly constructed, or were they even more negligent than that? I mean, was it something where they thought they had a process where they were capturing these things and dumping it and they didn't, or were they just careless?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm going to be going to Camp Lejeune. I'm one of a number of lawyers who will actually be going to the site within the next month. Mm-hmm. But a lot of these areas were fenced off for just dumping it into the ground. So
what, I'm a civil engineer. We used to line landfills,
Mhm.
or at the very least, you put a clay type substance in the bottom to sort of act as a barrier. So what you're saying is that there wasn't any of that kind of site preparation that failed. It was just, let's go dump it over here.
Well, and if there was, it was minimal.
Right.
All I can tell you is that they had different areas where they would just continue to dump, for example, benzene. I mean, so many of the chemicals they dumped were carcinogenic. And so
Hmm.
the calls I'm getting, I'll give you an example. I got a call from a guy a couple of weeks ago, and he was born at Camp Lejeune with one leg. Deformities are a big part of this. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, Parkinson's disease. There's a myriad of diseases, illnesses that people got, and 100 plus diseases. I tell people, don't assume anything when you call me. One of the things I need to point out, Bob, is that this is not a class action case,
Hmm.
not a class action suit. So what happens is you see so much advertising, people are think it's like any other case that you see on TV. And we've heard the stories in class action suits, unfortunately, where they hear and people tell me that it seems like the lawyers get all the money and the people get very little. That's not the case here. All of these cases are being handled individually. Okay, you're not part of a class action. We're going to be looking at each of these cases and handling them, and we're going to be looking at how badly they've been injured and what are these cases worth.
Let
That's
me
how we.
back up. I mean, this is actually an effort on the part of the government, I think, to do the right thing now.
Yeah.
Would you explain the law that was passed and just talk a little bit about the particulars of that? Because I don't think the government's trying to avoid anything, trying to defend. Not take responsibility. It's actually trying to provide relief. Am I correct in that?
You're
My
absolutely right.
understanding.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so it's called the Camp Lejeune Justice Act. And one of the attorneys that I'm part of a team. One of the attorneys that I'm working with actually is the one who worked for 15 years and put his blood, sweat, and tears to get this law passed. And to keep it very simple, what it is, it's a mechanism whereby people can call people like me, and we submit the claim for them. And the way the law is written, we have 6 months to try to work with the Attorney General's office in Jacksonville, North Carolina, because that's where all these cases will either be settled or that's where the jury trials will be, because that's where it happened in Jacksonville, North Carolina.
Right.
It sets a mechanism where they call me, and for example, and we file the claim, but you can't file suit for 6 months. It gives the Attorney General's office a chance to look at the case. We give them all the medical records. We tell people how this has affected everyone. So you're entitled to pain and suffering and all those things that go along with typical personal injury cases. So we're not looking at something to collect benefits per se, but we handle these cases when you include all of the everything else having to do with people who have suffered greatly. And the ripple effect is that many of these Marines died young. And so, for example, I'll give you an extreme example, but it's true. Let's say someone died of cancer in 1955. I got this call not too long ago. And I got it from the granddaughter who had never met her grandfather, who was a Marine at Camp Lejeune.
Mm-hmm.
And her grandfather had one child, which was this young lady's mother, who also died of cancer, and she was at Camp Lejeune. And she's an only child, and she's just destitute. She says, I wasn't at Camp Lejeune. I guess I can't do anything. I said, well, you can. You have inherited your grandfather's claim and your mother's claim. She said, you're kidding. I said, no. I said, I'm so glad you called me. I said, I'm going to be able to help you, young lady. And this happens a lot, because the ripple effect was that because parents died young, they weren't able to spread that wonderful wisdom that you and I and so many people grew up with, trying to get us to do the right thing instead of, finding themselves in an impoverished situation. So I tell people that I'm going to take you out of this misery. We're going to change your life, with the kind of money that we hope to get for you. And people say, well, what are these cases worth? And it's all based on what which each individual went through. We get all the records, we get the medical records, and then we're able to develop exactly what everyone went through and what they're going through now in order to determine what the values will be on this case, on their individual cases.
And Lawrence, I need to be careful. You know, this is, as I've said, this is new territory for me, and I'm not endorsing any of the legal claims here or trying to pass judgment on it. Really trying to explain the mechanics of it. You know, a huge problem, period of time, impacts multiple generations of people. There's a lack of knowledge of who needs to ask the question of whether or not I have an opportunity here or not. Let me flip the table a little bit differently. What about a person that lived at Camp Lejeune during this period of time that's not sick yet? There's a time window on these claims here. Clock
Yeah.
started ticking. You explained to me there was a 2-year time window starting in August, I think.
Correct.
And so you got until August of next year, roughly to
August 10th of August 9th next year is the last date which you can file a claim. And if people call me up and they have 5 different cancers after that date, it's over.
But suppose you're
You
not
can't make a
sick.
claim after that, after August 10th.
What if I had been at Camp Lejeune during that period of time and I'm not sick yet? Should I be talking to you and saying, if I get these cancers after August the 10th of next year, I want to make sure that I've established that I was there? How does that work in that case?
Sure. So, first of all, if there's some people who call and don't know if their parents or grandparents were at Camp Lejeune. They just don't know for whatever reason. We'll find out. So that's not an issue. We do 99% of everything for everyone. In answer to your direct question, and I get these calls and all the time, they say, look, I was at Camp Lejeune, but I'm fine.
Right.
I said, well, I hope you're fine. They said, well, what should I do? I said, you should still file a claim because we do something called medical monitoring. What is medical monitoring? Well, what we do is we track to see how they are doing going forward because they may have cancer and not know it. And we want to make sure that we file the claim because as the years pass by, all of a sudden they start finding out that they have all kinds of problems. They find out they have different types of illnesses, diseases. We will preserve their right going forward in the future to make sure that we pursue their claim. Let me tell you a quick story. Guy calls me up. He says, I'm fine. I was at Camp Lejeune. I said, I hope you're fine. I said, when is the next time you're going for a physical? He says, I'm actually going for a physical on Wednesday. I said, good. I said, tell them you want a PSA test. He said, a what? I said, a PSA test. I said, a test for prostate cancer. He said, well, I'm fine. I haven't had any symptoms. I said, well, you have to understand, cancers don't start with stage 4.
Right.
They start earlier. And let's detect whatever you may have early. He calls me up, kind of laughing and crying at the same time, because he was diagnosed after they did this. It's a blood draw. They can determine PSA. They diagnosed you with a PSA test to see if you have prostate cancer with a blood draw. And I say he was laughing and crying. He says, Mr. Land, he says, I haven't. I've got prostate cancer. He says, but they told me that I caught it early and they're going to save my life. You have saved my life. I said, well, let's cross our fingers. At least I got you on the road in the right direction. There's something I want to share with everyone that most people don't know about. It just came out last year. The Mayo Clinic, and they have 3 different locations. One's in Rochester, Minnesota. There's another one in Jacksonville, Florida. The good news is you don't have to travel to these places, but they just came out with a blood test. They can take 1 or 2 vials of blood, and they can determine whether or not you have one of 50 different types of cancer. And the whole key on this is early detection to save people's lives. So people have cancer and they don't know it. People have cases and they don't know it. So we want to protect their rights. The whole key is, and I tell people when we talk about filing a claim, we're not talking about filing suit. We're talking about filing the claim and then tracking you, following you, seeing how you're doing. And that's a perfect example of what I just told you. So we want to protect their potential claims and the ability to file suit. So like I said, the way the law is written is so different than any other law that's ever been written in the United States when it comes to injury cases, because typically you're able to file suit right away. And some lawyers have made the big mistake of filing suit right away, and that's not permitted by the federal law, and they're in trouble.
Is
Yeah.
there, you say this is not like a class action lawsuit, so there has not been a pool of capital that has been set aside to adjudicate these claims?
That's correct. But that's what you're going to hear, even on the ads that I see on television. And look, I'm just, look, a lot of people are saying that they hate to see all these ads as well. And we all kind of get tired of hearing some of the same ads. The problem is they're saying some of the same things. I'm not saying the same thing.
So there's not a set pool of capital. It's not a
That's
zero-sum
correct.
game, so to speak.
Yeah.
In that regard.
That's right.
You don't have to have been a Marine. You could have
Nope.
been a family member.
Well, let me
You
take it
could
one
be
step.
you could be an heir to someone who was affected that and you know, in your case may have passed away 60 years ago.
Yeah, this goes back almost, you will have a claim that goes back almost 70 years in certain circumstances. Almost
And
70.
this is not an attempt to go out and affix blame or put somebody in prison or any of those things. This is just, in theory, the government trying to right a serious mistake. Yeah,
Exactly.
they've admitted to that. I asked you this question, but I think it's important to ask you again. How does Camp Lejeune know that an aquifer is, you know, hundreds of feet underground? It's the water table. It's you know, a source of water. And now they say it's not a problem as of 1987. I gotta say I'm a little skeptical about that. How did they clean up an aquifer that was contaminated in the way that it was contaminated?
I will tell you, I have a lot of concerns about that. I can't tell you because all I can tell you is what they determined. They say they cleaned it up. I hope they have, but the specific years are between 53 and 87. We know that it was contaminated. Is it contaminated?
Are there people at Camp Lejeune now that are worried about the water source? I mean, are they
If I
drinking
was at Camp
bottled
Lejeune,
water? And is there some, are they running scared at this point because of this?
I'd be concerned. I would be concerned, but you know, I hope to God that they've what they've said to be the case. I hope that they are testing. I hope they're doing all those things. May I give you an example of something I think you'll find interesting?
Yes.
I got a call from a guy who worked in Raleigh, North Carolina. You ever been to Raleigh?
Of course.
Yeah. Well, he was a Campbell soup salesman. And I talk to everybody because I meet a lot of people and everywhere I go. And I don't care where I am. I mean, if I'm in Target, I'll just start talking to people in front of the line, or I'm at the golf course or whatever I'm doing. Even in the elevator I'm at the World Trade Center in downtown Norfolk, but we're handling these cases nationally and internationally because Marines have gone everywhere. So I get a call from this very nice lady who said that her husband's got 17 different illnesses. And I said, was he a Marine at Camp Lejeune? No. I said, okay, well, did he ever go to Camp Lejeune for anything? She said, well, he did. He was the representative for Campbell Soup out of Raleigh, North Carolina. He'd go there every 2 weeks and fill huge orders for all the people on the base. And I said, how often did he go? She said, oh, he went about once every 2 weeks. And this is something that everyone should keep in mind. And again, we know exactly what we're doing on this, but the way the law is written is that if you don't have to have been a Marine. You don't have to have been a family member of a Marine. But if someone came to the base for at least 30 days, cumulatively, over a 34-year period, and they have a problem or problems, they have a claim. And I shot people.
This raises an entirely different set of questions for me because I can't imagine that that aquifers just don't necessarily, stop at the edge of the base. Jacksonville, North Carolina, Emerald Isle, a number of these things are in close proximity to that. I'm not trying to speculate or accuse anybody of anything, but I wonder if this contamination, stayed within the boundaries of Camp Lejeune, or whether it's actually spread over a wider area.
Sure.
So
And then I just want to say one more thing, Bob, that it's important for people to, because I've heard other lawyers say they have to have been there, even people who weren't Marines or their families of Marines, that they have to have been there for at least 30 days. They're telling people they have to be at there 30 days consecutively. Not true. I'll give you an extreme. If someone came to that base, this Campbell Soup guy came to that base once a year for 30 years, so he was in there 30 days cumulatively over a period of time, he's got a case if he has some illness or disease.
is it your impression that you mentioned, I guess, a district attorney in Jacksonville? Is that who's responsible for
It'd be the Attorney General for
the
the
Attorney General of the state of North Carolina is
U.S.
responsible for
District
this?
Court in the Eastern District of North Carolina, because all these cases are going to be, if we have to try them, it'll have to be in Jacksonville, North Carolina, in federal court.
Is it your opinion or your experience that Attorney General is fighting these cases, or is the attorney, trying to preserve the expense, or is the Attorney General trying to solve these cases in the most beneficial way possible? I'm just wondering where you think they are on the spectrum. How aggressively contested are these cases?
Well, this is still a baby law. They have had an opportunity, and they're taking their time. We expect that now that the 6-month period is over, that they will hopefully negotiating in good faith, but maybe they won't. Based on the everything that I've heard, it appears that they're going to be fighting us on these cases, and that's unfortunate. But at this point now, we're able to file suit and move forward on these cases.
Yeah, there's a tendency, Lawrence, I think, and once a Marine, always a Marine. There's a tendency of loyalty to the Corps, grin and bear it, that sort of thing. Have you found that there are people that are just reluctant to bring this up simply because they don't want to hurt the Marine Corps? I think there's a lot of loyalty. There's certainly Marines among all the branches of the service.
I was just talking to a Marine earlier today, who I'm working with. He was a captain at Camp Lejeune, and he's now a retired Marine. And we were talking about that, but this does not reflect on the Marines. Okay, they didn't even know about it, and so that's not the situation. As a matter of fact, on these cases, you don't have to prove negligence. They've accepted responsibility. It's our job, and people shouldn't try to do this on their own, but it's clearly our job to connect the exposure people got to the disease and to the water contamination. We have, with my team, 150 different experts who will be able to testify as necessary about whether or not this particular disease came from the contamination at Camp Lejeune.
So the message is, if you think you were exposed, find out. At a minimum, find out. If you had a family member who had an illness, find out. The burden has shifted. The burden is on you as an individual to step forward and ask, how does this apply to me? Is that a good summary of the message?
And don't make an assumption that you're okay. Don't assume that you don't have a case. Don't let other lawyers tell you don't have cases.
How else should folks reach out and get in touch with you? Where can they find more information about this?
The best thing to do is I've been practicing for 46 years, and this has really become a mission. It's I was telling someone recently I was going to slow down. Instead, I've sped up because there's such a short period of time within which claims can be filed. So I can't tell people enough, don't wait, because people wait and all of a sudden, you know how life works, life gets in the way of a lot of things. And before you know it, you go, oh, wait a minute, I thought it was this. And some people are telling people they have a longer period of time. It's not 2 years from the date you make your claim. It's not. Okay. And that's what I'm hearing lawyers telling people. Well, once we make the claim, you got 2 years. No, you don't. No, you don't. Not in this case. Okay. And see, that's the problem you're going to have is a lot of misinformation from lawyers and non-lawyers. They have 2 years from August 10th, which means next year, August 10th is it. So I tell people, give me a call. Just call me. I just encourage people to give me a call and let me help them. Don't wait. And then I'll tell you moving forward how we do it.
Well, thank you, Lawrence. You've been listening to the Mission Oriented podcast on the Veteran Crowd Network. This is, a very delicate subject. If you feel like, you've been affected by this, you should definitely be finding out, reaching out, seeking resources through Lawrence and others to determine this. It's an important issue. I don't think it's one that's going to go away, but I would hate to see someone miss an opportunity by failing to act. So, Lawrence, thank you for bringing that message to our listeners. And I would just encourage people out there who had been at Camp Lejeune over this period of time to find out, get some answers, take a half an hour and spend some time and see, how this might have affected you, because it's a big issue. And I think that, a lot of good is being done and coming from this. And, hopefully you don't have a cancer, or you don't have an illness, you don't have a birth defect, and you've been lucky and it doesn't happen, but you could sleep at night knowing, well, that you had, examined that, even if it had not affected you directly. Lawrence, thank you for coming on the program and sharing this. There'll be links to Lawrence's video and contact information on the landing page for the Mission Oriented podcast. Lawrence, thank you for doing this.
I want to share one more thing with you that I didn't mention before. There are some people who are so sick right now that they're on their deathbed virtually. One of the clients died just a couple of weeks ago. So they said, I just don't have the strength. I said, well, your claim will be inherited by your wife and children. I said, let your wife sign up for you. We can get the claim done that way, or a child, when I say child, an adult child, let them make the claim for you. Let's preserve those rights. So I understand, and I know for me and for so many others, the most important thing for me is that something happens to me, I want to make sure that my wife or my children will be provided for after I die. And so I said, do it for your family, do it for your children, because so many of these folks, because they've been suffering, have not been able to work, and the little money they bring in just doesn't cut it, and that has that ripple effect. So please, let's change the lives of hopefully you, and when I talk with them, I tell them, change their lives, maybe for their wife and their children, and let's turn all that around.
Thank you, Lawrence. Again, let's be on the lookout here. And if you've got family members, friends, colleagues, be sure that they listen to this podcast. Great information, Lawrence. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Mission Oriented. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and you won't miss an episode. To learn more about Mission Oriented and the Veteran Crowd Network, visit us at www.veterancrowdnetwork.com.